Good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Wednesday night. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Stephen in New Hampshire, Yehuda in South Carolina, Paul in the Great Northwest, Bill in Mid-Missouri, Karen in Northern California, Bella in Florida, John in Maine, Sharon in New Jersey, Lucy in Minnesota, Shandor in the Bronx, and where'd it go? Ryan in Jacksonville, Melissa in Great Neck, Jonathan in LA, marked safe from the atmospheric river of 2024. Thank God. It seems to be pretty much over, although I think I saw it's going to rain a little bit more tonight. And then, God willing, it'll be over by tomorrow. Joe in the Inland Empire, guy in Ohio. Tom, shalom from PA, on time. Great to have you with us. Ella says shalom. Marjorie in Georgia. Welcome, everybody. Our daf today is page 96 here in Tractate Bava Kamma, the 21st volume of the Talmud, continuing our journey through chapter 9. And our discussion of Mishnah number 1 here in chapter 9. God willing, we're going to complete it today and move on to Mishnah number 2. The Gemara, and near the top of page 96a, the Gemara continues its discussion of stolen items that have been enhanced, right? General principle, the robber has to return what he stole in order to make it right. But if the item changed while it was in the possession of the robber, then very often what he does is pay the monetary value of what he stole at the time that he stole it. If the thing changed while in his possession, it might have changed naturally, something that aged or deteriorated. Or it might have changed because he enhanced it, right? Where he stole raw wood and fashioned it into a chair. So it's a significant change, and it changed because of the work that he put into it. So at least under some views in certain circumstances, he acquires that object as his own, and what he has to return to the robbery victim, right, is the monetary value of what he stole. But not according to all views. According to some views, he has to return it in whatever condition that it's in. And then he may be entitled to compensation for the work and resources that he invested into that thing that he stole. So let's continue the discussion. Rava says, if one robbed another of an item and enhanced it, like he turned wood into a chair, and then he sold it to a third party. And similarly, if one robbed the victim of an item and then he enhanced it, and then the robber died, and he bequeathed the item that he had enhanced to his heir. So he sold that which he enhanced, and he bequeathed that which he enhanced. And the robbery victim, should he wish to recover the stolen item itself, must pay the purchaser or heir for the enhanced value, right? So presumably the third party who purchased or the heir who inherited is not aware that they were purchasing or inheriting a stolen item. Now the robbery victim shows up and says, that's mine, I want it back. Now, the robber put all this, work or money into the object, and the purchaser bought a more expensive item than that which was stolen because of the enhancement of the robber. So, what is the victim entitled to? The value of the item when it was taken from him. So he can either get that money, or if he's going to get the item itself, then he's going to owe that purchaser or that heir the difference in value between what was stolen from him and what he's taking now, because that enhanced value, the difference between the value of the item when it was stolen and that which the robber sold or bequeathed, that value accrued to the robber because of the change, and then it was sold or inherited. So now the heir or the purchaser is entitled to that monetary difference, right, between what was stolen and what the condition that it's in now. If the robbery victim wants his item back, he has to actually pay that increase in its value. Now, Rava raises a dilemma related to this halacha. What is the law if a purchaser enhanced a stolen item, right? We've been talking about that the robber enhanced it. What if the purchaser purchased a stolen item and then he put this work and investment of time and resources into it? So must the robbery victim pay the purchaser for the enhanced value or not? And after Rava raised the dilemma, he then resolved it. What has the first person sold to the second in any sale? He has sold any rights that will come into his possession, since the robber had the rights to the value of his enhancements to the stolen item. He sold those rights to the purchaser as well. So Rava raised a dilemma. What is the law if a Gentile robber enhanced the value of a stolen item? And Rav Acha of Difti said to Ravina, shall we arise and institute an ordinance for the benefit of a Gentile? And Ravina said to him, this question is not necessary except where it was the case that a Gentile sold it to a Jew. So Rava was asking if the Jew needs to return the enhanced value. And the Gemara comments, ultimately, one who comes to possess an item due to purchasing it from a Gentile is like a Gentile himself, because, as stated previously, in any sale, the purchaser's rights are identical to the seller's. And since the sages did not institute ordinances for the benefit of Gentiles, the Jewish purchaser does not have those rights either. And the Gemara explains the question is not necessary except where it was the case that a Jew robbed another of the item and sold it to a Gentile, and then the Gentile enhanced it, and then the Gentile went back and sold it to another Jew. So what is the law in this case? Do we say, since it was initially stolen by a Jew and was then acquired by a Jew, the sages did institute an ordinance? Or perhaps, since there is the ownership of a Gentile intervening, the sages did not institute an ordinance? And the Gemara comments, the dilemma shall stand unresolved. And so just two principles that we touched on in that discussion. One was the ordinance of for the benefit of the penitent, right, where the sages instituted an ordinance that kind of diminished a little bit, not entirely certainly, but diminished a little bit the penalty for the robber in order to encourage him to make atonement, right? If it was too difficult for him to restore what he took, then fewer robbers would go straight. And so they made it a little bit easier. And second, this idea of do the sages institute ordinances for the benefit of Gentiles, that's not some kind of racism or prejudice. What they're saying is they institute ordinances for the benefit of the community that is affected. And generally speaking, they don't institute ordinances for uncommon situations. So a Gentile benefiting from an ordinance that was passed for the Jewish community, that would be a very uncommon situation. And ordinances are passed, are instituted for more common situations. New subject. So the Mishna teaches that if one robbed another of wood and fashioned it into vessels, he acquired the wood due to that significant change. And the Gemara discusses what qualifies as a change. Rav Papa said, with regard to this one who robbed another of a palm tree and cut it down, although he threw it from the land of the robbery victim to his own land, He did not acquire it. And what is the reason? The tree was initially called a palm tree, and now, although it has been cut down, it is still called a palm tree. So the change to the item is not sufficiently significant for the robber to acquire it. Interesting, because one was a living palm tree that had a future ahead of it to keep growing. The other is a palm tree that's been cut down. It's dead, right? It's dead wood. But it's still called a palm tree. So what we're talking about when we're talking about significant change, if you think about it, just cutting it down is really not that significant. It's significant to the tree, but it's not significant to what the object is that we are talking about. It's still called a palm tree. Moreover, if one robbed another of a palm tree and made it into logs, he still did not acquire it, since now, in any event, they are called palm tree logs. By contrast, if one robbed another of logs and fashioned them into beams, then he has acquired them, since this change is significant, right? It's not just a change of name. Quite a bit of work had to be put into a raw log to turn it into a beam, right? It has to be planed and smoothed and measured and make sure it's straight so that it could be used as a building material. If one robbed another of large beams and fashioned them into small beams, he did not acquire them, since they are still called beams. And if he fashioned them into boards, he did acquire them, because that is quite a significant change. Now, Rava said, this one who robbed another of a palm frond and fashioned it into leaves, known as chutzeh, i.e. he removed the leaves from the spine, has acquired it, since initially it was called a palm frond and now it is called leaves. One who robbed another of leaves and fashioned them into a broom has acquired them, since initially they were called leaves and now they're called a broom. One who robbed another of a broom and fashioned it into a rope has not acquired it. And what is the reason for this? The reason is that he can go back and unravel it, and it will once again be a broom. Now, Rav Papa raises a dilemma. What is the law if the central twin leaf becomes split? I.e., is this considered a change through which a stolen lulav would be acquired? That the lulav and esrog that we used to wave during the holiday of Sukkot, I don't have my dry lulav here. But at any rate, what is a lulav, right? It is the palm frond before it has sort of blossomed and spread out. It's just all the leaves are kind of tucked in and it's one straight thing. That's what we need during Sukkot to wave it around in combination with the branches of the willow and the hadar, and the myrtle tree, as well as the etrog, known in English as a citron, right? But it's the lulav is the long palm branch. So if the central twin leaf becomes split, i.e., is this considered a change through which a stolen lulav would be acquired? And the Gemara cites a proof. Come in here, that which Rabbi Matan says, that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says. If the central twin leaf was removed, the lulav becomes unfit. So presumably this palm branch that is now called a lulav because we can use it during the ritual of waving the lulav and etrog during Sukkot. Once that center leaf splits into two, it's actually no longer a lulav. It can't be used for that purpose. So that would seem to be a significant change. And what is it not that the same is true for a case where the central twin leaf became split, i.e. that this lulav has been rendered unfit to be used for the mitzvah, and therefore the robber has acquired the lulav as a result of this change? So the Gemara answers, no. The case where it was removed is different, as the result is that it is lacking, and an incomplete lulav is certainly unfit. But if the leaf remains in place, albeit split, it does not necessarily render the lulav unfit. The lulav has not been changed, and therefore the robber does not acquire it. So it sounds like if an object that is fit for a mitzvah is rendered unfit for the mitzvah, that's a significant change that would cause the robber to acquire it, although what the benefit of owning it would be is certainly a good question. Now, there are those who say that the question was resolved as follows. come in here, that which Rabbi Mutton says, that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says, if the central twin leaf became split, it becomes like a lulav whose central twin leaf was completely removed, and it is unfit. And if so, learn from this statement that if the central twin leaf became split, the robber has acquired the lulav as a result of this significant change. New subject. Rav Papa said, this one who robbed another of earth, dirt, and fashioned it into a brick has not acquired it due to the change. And what is the reason for this? It is that he can return it and convert it back into earth. By contrast, if he robbed another of a brick and by crushing it turned it into earth, he has acquired it due to the change. And if you say, well, perhaps he will return it and fashion it into a brick again, so why isn't this a reversible change? And the answer is because this is a different brick and a new entity has arrived, i.e. entered into existence here. See, isn't that interesting? Right? If you started with dirt, right, and you fashioned it into a brick, okay, so then you can crush it and it'll be earth again. But if you started with a brick and you crush that into earth, and you could say, well, somebody could just fashion that back into a brick. Well, yeah, but it takes work to fashion it into a brick. And then what you've got is a new brick. It's not the same brick as the one that was crushed before and returned to dirt. It might be made from that same dirt, but it is a new brick. And so we're going to call that a significant change. And Rav Papa also said, this one who robbed another of a bar of silver, known as a naskha, and fashioned it into coins, has not acquired it due to the change. And what is the reason? He can return it and by melting the coins, turn them into a bar of silver. But by contrast, if he robbed another of coins and fashioned them into a bar of silver, he has acquired them due to the change. And why do you say in response to this, what do you say in response to this? That perhaps he will return and fashion them into coins? These are new coins, and we have a new entity that has arrived here, and therefore it was a significant change, and it was enough for the robber to acquire it. Remember, when he changes a significant change to that which he stole, it's not that he's off the hook as a robber. He owes the robbery victim the value of what he took at the time that he took it. But this, because it has been changed in this way, he acquires that, and what he owes is the monetary value and not, the dirt or the silver bar, etc., the changed object. And Rav Papa continues, if the stolen coins were black, shechime, i.e. they were old and used, right, as opposed to new shiny coins, these are coins that have oxidized. And he made them as new by cleaning them thoroughly. He has not acquired them because they will become black again over time. By contrast, if, however, they were new and he made them black, he has acquired them. And what do you say in response to this? That perhaps he will return and make them new by cleaning them? Their blackness is already known, and therefore the coins have been changed irreversibly. And there was a note about this, is very interesting, that new shiny coins were not desirable, right? New shiny coins were suspected of being counterfeit. Old coins that had been in circulation for a while were understood to, be more reliably authentic. So what some would do is age the coins so that they would be accepted more readily. But the way that this works is because the older coins are more desirable. New subject, the Mishna teaches this is the principle. All robbers pay according to the value of the stolen item at the time of the robbery. And the Gemara asks, what is added by the phrase, this is the principle? And the Gemara replies, it serves to add that which Rabbi Ella says. If one stole a lamb, and during the time that it was in the thief's possession, it became a ram. Or if one stole a calf, and while in the thief's possession, it became an ox. Then a change occurred while the animal was in his possession, and he has acquired it due to the change. If he then slaughtered or sold the animal, he slaughters his own animal and he sells his own animal, and he does not become liable to pay the penalty of 4 or 5 times the value of the animal. What? What? Right? Because we said earlier, this must be a minority view, right? Because we talked a lot about the fact that if one steals an ox or a sheep, right? Special cases for the ox and the sheep, and then he slaughters or sells it, right? Now, which makes it impossible to restore what he took to the victim. So now he owes not just the value of what he stole, but the fourfold or fivefold payment. Now, according to this minority view of Rabbi Ella, since he acquired it, I see. Because maybe it's even a majority view. The point is he stole a lamb, it became a ram, right? So if he stole a ram and sold or slaughtered it, he certainly owes the fourfold or fivefold payment. But if he stole a lamb and then he ended up slaughtering a ram, right, because it was in his possession long enough that it became, an adult animal, that would trigger the fourfold or fivefold payment, but that's not what he stole. Right? So perhaps he'd be off the hook for making the fourfold or fivefold payment, which I guess that fourfold or fivefold payment would be based on a ram. On a lamb, not a full-grown ram, right? Let's see where the law ended up on this. If one stole a lamb that grew into a ram while in his possession, or if one stole a calf that grew into an ox while in his possession, he has acquired the animal through this change. So very interesting. It actually became the law that we don't trigger that fourfold or fivefold payment because he stole something that was worth quite a bit less, a lamb, right, or a calf, and then held on to it long enough and presumably fed it, right, and put care into it until it became an adult, and it's for selling or slaughtering an adult sheep or an adult ox that the robber would then be forced to pay that fourfold or fivefold payment. Now the Gemara relates there was a certain man who robbed another of a pair of oxen, and he then went and plowed his field with them, and he sowed seeds with them, and eventually he returned the pair of oxen to their owner. So the robbery victim came before Rav Nachman to claim payment from the robber. And Rav Nachman said to the robbery victim and the robber, "Go estimate the amount by which the value of the land was enhanced during the time that the pair of oxen was in the possession of the robber, and the robber must pay that amount." So very interesting. This is something new, right? So what happened was somebody owned the oxen. Now he lost the use of them while they were in the robber's possession. What did the robber do with those oxen? He worked his own field, right? And so he increased the value of his own field because he was plowing and planting with that pair of oxen. I guess he became penitent or he was caught. That's not stated here. Presumably got caught, actually, but we're not sure. At any rate, he restores the pair of oxen to their original owner. Now they come before Rav Nachman, and he says, not only you return the oxen, good, but the value of the work that they performed for you, the robber, while they were in your possession, give that to the robbery victim. Why? Why would he have to do that? To give the enhanced value of his own land, the robber's own land, that was the result of the work that those oxen did on his land, he owes that much money to the robbery victim. Now that's actually a surprising result. Rava said to Rav Nachman, did the oxen alone enhance the value of the land? Did the land not become enhanced in and of itself? Perhaps not all of the enhanced value of the land was due to the labor performed by the oxen, right? Real estate prices went up during that period. So Rav Nachman said, did I say that they should estimate and give him all of the enhanced value? I said only half. Well, Rava said to him, ultimately, it is a stolen item, and it is returned as it was at the time of the robbery. And as we learned in the Mishna, all robbers pay according to the value of the stolen item at the time of the robbery. That was returned. The oxen were good as new when they were returned to the victim. So why should the robber also pay the owner half the value of the enhancement? isn't this the opposite of the ordinance for the penitent, in that this would very much discourage robbers, from coming clean and returning what they stole, where now they're liable to pay not only just to return what they stole, but also any value that they got out of it while it was in their possession. Why would we ask them to do that? Rav Nachman said to Rava, "Didn't I tell you that when I am sitting in judgment, don't say anything to me, i.e. do not question or comment upon my rulings? An indication that my rulings should not be questioned is, as our friend Huna has said about me, that King Shapur himself and I are brothers with regard to monetary laws. Meaning, with regard to monetary laws, my opinion is equal to that of Shmuel." And this man, because who was also, in other words, Shmuel's rulings vis-a-vis the Jewish community were sort of on a par with the law of the land, right? Because they were living in Persia. This was the Babylonian Jewish community, which was ensconced within Persia, of which King Shapur was the king. So what does this mean? It means, that my rulings are gold, right? That's what Rav Nachman is saying. Don't question it. So why did I say this? This man is an experienced robber, and I wish to penalize him. Therefore, I compelled him to pay the enhanced value, although by right, he is not obligated to do so. Right? So this was a special punishment because it's a professional robber, and Rav Nachman wants to penalize him more than, the spontaneous robber or the opportunity robber. Right, the robber who just sees an opportunity but is not a professional robber. Rav Nachman's special case. And in fact, how did the law come out? If one robs another of an animal, utilizes it for work, and then returns it to its owner, although he has transgressed a prohibition by using what he stole, he is not obligated to pay anything to the owner, provided the animal was not weakened and its value was not diminished. Right? In other words, if he returned an animal that was good as new, then he's done. However, if this is a known robber, the court penalizes him. It estimates his profits from his use of the animal and compels him to give that amount to the robbery victim, per the holding of Rav Nachman. And this penalty can be imposed even outside of the land of Israel if it is imposed by the leading judge of the generation or by a court that has been elected by the community. The Bach and the Gra, meaning the Vilna Gaon, explain that if the robber used the animal to plow, he must pay half of the enhanced value of the field. That's how we measure the amount that he is going to owe. But the fact that he owes anything beyond the value of the animal is a penalty that we impose only on known robbers. And with that, we conclude our discussion of Mishnah number 1 here in chapter 9. Before we continue with Mishnah number 2, I'm just going to read you a note from Rav Steinsaltz about Shavor Malka, in Aramaic, King Shapur. So Shapur was a name of several of the Persian kings. This particular King Shapur is King Shapur I, who ruled from, in the Hebrew calendar, 3901 to 3932, in the standard calendar from the years 141 to 172 CE. And he was the second ruler of the Sassanid dynasty and the son of its founder. King Shapur continued the wars against the Romans and conquered extensive territory from them, reaching as far as Syria and beyond. In a battle near Odessa, he defeated the Roman Emperor Valerian and took him into captivity and kept him as a prisoner until the latter's death. And he had his captives build several cities and dams, and his domestic policy reflected tolerance toward other religions. That was King Shapur. Mishnah number 2 here in chapter 9. If one robbed another of an animal and it aged while in his possession, consequently diminishing its value, or if one robbed another of Canaanite slaves and they aged while in his possession, so they have been changed. The robber therefore pays according to the value of the stolen item at the time of the robbery. Rabbi Meir says, with regard to Canaanite slaves, he says to the robbery victim, that which is yours is before you. And maybe a little bit of the thinking there as well. If the slave had been in your possession, he would have aged just the same. If one robbed another of a coin and it cracked, thereby reducing its value, or if one robbed another of produce and it rotted, or if one robbed another of wine and it fermented, then he pays according to the value of the item that was stolen at the time of the robbery. If he robbed another of a coin and it was invalidated by the government, or if he robbed another of teruma and it became ritually impure, or if he robbed another of leavened bread and Passover elapsed over it, so it became worthless to Jews, and therefore it is prohibited to derive benefit from it, or if he robbed another of an animal and the sin was performed with that animal, thereby disqualifying it for use as an offering, or if the animal was disqualified from being sacrificed upon the altar for some other reason, or if the animal was going out to be stoned because it gored and killed a person at some point after the robbery. In all these cases, the robber says to the robbery victim, that which is yours is before you. In all these cases, although the value of the stolen item has been diminished or altogether lost, since the change is not externally discernible, the robber returns the item in its current state, right? It's not changed. There's no significant change to the item. Even though its value has dropped, there's no apparent change. It still looks like the object that was stolen, and that's why the robber can say, that which is yours is before you. That's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara. With regard to the Mishnah's statement that one who robbed another of an animal, and the animal aged, so the robber pays what its value was at the time of the robbery. Rav Papa says, it is not so that aged means that it actually aged. But even if the animal was simply weakened, which is a less significant change, it is still considered changed, and the robber has acquired the animal. So the Gemara asks, but didn't we learn in the Mishnah that it aged, indicating that a lesser change, for example, weakening, is not significant? And the Gemara responds, Rav Papa was speaking of weakening that is like aging, i.e. the animal became so weak that it will not return to its former health. Now, we've spoken a lot about the robber stole something and enhanced its value, right? It became more valuable, so he can just pay the worth of that thing as it was at the time that he stole it, and then he keeps this improved object. Now we're talking about an animal that decreased in value, right? It was weakened or it aged. And so it's good, very good, right, for the robbery victim that the robber owes the value of the item that he stole at the time that he stole it, because that value was greater than the value of the item now. Mar Kashisha, the son of Rav Chisda, said to Rav Ashi, this is what they say in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Even if one stole a lamb and it became a ram, or a calf and it became an ox, it is considered that a change occurred while the animal was in the robber's possession, and he has acquired it due to this change. If he then slaughtered it or sold the animal, he slaughters his own animal and he sells his own animal, and he does not become liable to pay the fourfold or fivefold payment, as we mentioned above. Now Rav Ashi said to him, didn't I say to you, do not exchange the names of the men in whose name you are transmitting words of Torah? That statement was stated in the name of Rabbi Ella, not in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. In either case, it's the law. Now, the Mishnah teaches that Rabbi Meir says, with regard to Canaanite slaves, he says to the robbery victim, that which is yours is before you. So the Gemara comments, Rav Chanina bar Abdimi says that Rav says the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. And the Gemara asks, and would Rav set aside the opinion of the rabbis who are the majority and practice the law in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir? The sages say it is because it is taught in a baraisa in the opposite manner, i.e., with the opinions reversed, so that the rabbis, rather than Rabbi Meir, hold that with regard to slaves, the robber says, that which is yours is before you. The Gemara asks, and would Rav set aside the Mishnah and practice the law in accordance with the statement of a baraisa? And the Gemara responds, Rav also teaches the Mishnah in the opposite manner. And what is the reasoning of Rav, who reversed the opinions in the Mishnah in light of the baraisa? On the contrary, let him reverse the opinions in the baraisa in light of the Mishnah. And the sages say in response, Rav also learned the Mishnah in the opposite manner. Rav did not decide to reverse the opinions in the Mishnah. In the text of the Mishnah that he utilized, the opinions were the same as in the Baraisa. And if you wish, say instead that Rav did in fact reverse the opinions in the Mishnah based upon the principle, when he does not reverse a Mishnah due to a Baraisa, it is when there is one Mishnah that he will not reverse in light of one Baraisa. But he would reverse one Mishnah if there were two Baraisas that conflicted with it. And in this case, there is a second Baraisa in which the opinions are the reverse of those found in the Mishnah. The second Baraisa is as it is taught in the Tosefta to Bava Mitzia 8:23 and 24, in the case of one who exchanges a cow for a donkey. And in the meantime, the cow gave birth. And similarly, in the case of one who sells his Canaanite maidservant, and in the meantime, she gave birth. If in either of these cases, the purchaser and the seller have a dispute as to when the birth took place, where this one says, she gave birth at the time that she was in my possession, and therefore the offspring is mine, and the other one is silent, well, then the one who stated definitively that she gave birth while in his possession has acquired the offspring. If this one says, I do not know, and that one says, I do not know, then they shall divide the value of the offspring. If this one says, she gave birth while in my possession, and that one says, she gave birth while in my possession, right before or after the purchase or the trade took place, then the seller must take an oath that she gave birth while in his possession, as anyone who is obligated to take an oath that is enumerated in the Torah takes an oath and does not pay. So this is the statement of Rabbi Meir. In this case, since the seller initially had possession of the animal or the maidservant, he is considered the defendant, and therefore it is sufficient for him to take an oath to exempt himself from payment and maintain possession of the offspring. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. The Baraisa continues, and the rabbis say that one does not take an oath concerning either Canaanite slaves or concerning land. Again, slavery has been practiced in thousands of years, thank God, but when it was common in the world, very common in the world, sadly, this is how Jewish law regulated it. Now, this indicates that according to the opinion of the rabbis, Canaanite slaves have the legal status of land, whereas according to the opinion of Rabbi Meir, they do not. It follows then that in the Mishnah here as well, it is the rabbis and not Rabbi Meir who maintain that with regard to slaves, one says that which is yours is before you, as one does with regard to land. And the Gemara asks if it is true that the opinion that the Mishnah attributed to Rabbi Meir was attributed by Rav to the rabbis, then this phrase, the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, is imprecise. Rav should have said that the law is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis. And the Gemara responds, this is what Rav is saying, according to the way that you have reversed the opinions in the Mishnah, and you taught that Rabbi Meir says that the robber says to the robbery victim, that which is yours is before you, then the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, despite the fact that according to Rav, this is the opinion of the rabbis. And there we'll knock off at exactly the bottom, the end of page 96b. And tomorrow, God willing, we'll pick it up at the top of 97a. Oh, it looks like quite a few comments. Bill, so check my logic here. I almost said check my luggage. Check my logic here. Just making sure I understand the logic the sages are using, taking the example of the silver coins and the bar. So, one silver bar of a kind with any silver bar of the same weight, purity, and dimensions is exchangeable with the same. So even if it's made into coins, it remains in its previous state. By contrast, coins are individuated. A silver shekel and a silver dinar and a silver drachma, even if all three are in the same weight, are not in fact the same coin. Thus, even if they were melted down, what was stolen was those coins, not any coins. Also, because if they're melted down and then you make coins from the raw silver, right after the melting, the coins that you made are new coins. Right? You can't say that these are the coins that existed before they were melted down. And then a good question is, how could anybody make coins, right? That's something governments do. Now, I suppose that there were, I'm sure you can know more about this bill than I do, probably some people made private coins in the sense that, they weighed out the amount, more like slugs, which they would claim is pure silver and of the right weight, etc. And this is why people look to the government to make, reliable coins that they could, count on. And so if you're talking about, a coin that was struck from silver, that was the product of old coins that were melted down, you can see why the new coins are in fact new coins. They're not the old coins, and that would be a significant change. Tom, so all you have to do is hold on to something you steal for it to age? Doesn't that penalize the victim by making him wait even longer to get recompense? I mean, I don't think the idea is that the robber is, has a plan all along. Steal it, hold on to it, then it's mine, and all I have to do is pay for what I stole, the value of what I stole. I mean, it's almost like, when is that a strategy? I suppose when you want to buy something and the seller won't sell. So you steal it, hold on to it for a while, and then I guess admit it. But now you're not going to return what you stole. You're going to return its value because it changed while it was in your possession. I suppose that would be a strategy that works, but I think in most of these cases, we're not really talking about that. We're talking about, did time pass before the court adjudicates or not, right? There's definitely a sense that we're not going to reward robbers. Why would we ever talk about them acquiring that which they stole? Simply because, enough time had elapsed where it can't really be restored. What they took doesn't exist anymore because it aged, because it was enhanced, because it was deteriorated. And that's why, to make it right, the robber has to pay the money worth of what he took. And then he's not going to pay the money and give back that which he stole. And that's why we say he acquired it. Lucy, should the robber also compensate the victim for the fact that the victim went through pain and trouble because of the missing item? So the robber improved the item, returning the improved item could compensate some for the trouble. That's a great question. We haven't seen that yet, right? When we talked about, doing damage to a person such that, we trigger pain and suffering, medical expenses, loss of livelihood, etc., that seems to be where you literally injure a person. So hurting someone, by depriving them of their property doesn't seem to trigger those other kinds of indemnity. And so we're only really talking about restitution and how we're going to make restitution, but not those associated costs. We haven't seen that yet. I'm not saying that's not going to happen, but we haven't seen it yet. Marjorie says, in voir dire here in Atlanta, Georgia, so Marjorie's a lawyer, and I was asked about my cattle, maybe she was one of the parties to a case. So in voir dire here in Atlanta, Georgia, I was asked about my cattle that were rustled in Arizona. I was a victim of grand theft. Oh, I see. So Marjorie was being questioned as a potential juror in a case. That's the voir dire. And so they kept me on the jury, but talk at lunch that day was hysterical. These studies still seem relevant to me, and we still have a recalcitrant goat. Where is a goat thief when you need one? All the grandchildren love him. Right, so I mean, what Marjorie, I think, is referring to is the idea that if you've been a victim of the type of crime for which you would act as a juror, there's a worry that you'd be biased against the defendant. You couldn't be fully objective since you've been that kind of a victim before. I'm sure I would be. But very interesting, very interesting. And okay, so Joseph says, back when I was just out of high school, I used to sit in Harvard law classes before I knew that it was permitted to audit. And I would just sneak into the classes. So I'm wondering what the Talmud says about stealing non-material goods, like, say, not paying a Torah scholar for his time. I think we may have discussed that somewhere. It's very interesting. There is a teaching elsewhere in the Talmud that when you're late right? When you're late to a meeting, when you are late to arrive, to a breakfast meeting, a lunch meeting, a work meeting, any time that you've agreed to be somewhere at a certain time, so that another person is waiting for you and you arrived late, that is considered stealing, right? It's considered stealing. But I think it's metaphorically considered stealing because you're not actually, obligated to pay them for their time. It's more that we should understand the gravity of being late, but it's not like a court will impose that as damages. So in terms of other things that are non-material in nature, there's also a teaching that, especially these days, right? We've talked about this. It's been a few years since we talked about it, but there's this idea that now that everybody orders things online, right, and they get a better deal by shopping around online. So what some people would be tempted to do is to go to an actual bricks and mortar store where there's an expert salesman and get his advice, right, on, what's the best stereo or what's the best, exercise equipment or what's the best TV, whatever, and learn about the product lines from that salesman. And then you go home and order it online for a cheaper price than you would have paid in the bricks and mortar store. So you stole the salesman's time. Right? He could have been helping another customer from whom he maybe stood to make a commission. Now you could say, well, if the salesman is not working on commission, he's going to educate people anyway. Still, who employs the salesman? The store. Did you buy the product in the store? No, you went and bought it somewhere else. That is considered a form of theft. Do you owe damages because you performed that kind of theft? I don't think so. But again, it reminds us of the seriousness of doing that. If you're going to have a salesman assist you and educate you on which are the best products, pay a little extra and buy it from, the salesman himself or from the store that employs the salesman. That's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we're together again tomorrow.